I'm really excited today to be joined by Eric Gilbert, one of the co-founders of Treefort, who's decided to come down and chat with us today a little bit about finding your purpose. And jumping right in, one of my first questions is, what is Treefort? Where did it come from? How did you get involved? I know that was 3 questions, but let's start there.
So for those that aren't familiar with Treefort, it was founded as a multi-venue, basically like showcase style festival for music primarily, and so it has developed over time to showcase a lot of different things. And we have these other forts now, including a hack fort and yoga fort, story fort,
Kid Fort.
kid fort,
Every fort you can, beer fort.
skate fort, yeah,
skate fort.
food fort. And so, it was really founded on this idea of so I was in a touring band for a long time with my wife, and part of sort of the underground music scene, and it really trying to help shine a light on, there's just so much music, there's so much artistic talent in general that gets overlooked by sort of mainstream audiences, essentially. So it was sort of built on sort of a tasting menu from like a music standpoint, but for fans here in Boise, but then also in the region, just trying to help create like a hub here in Boise and help sort of build the music scene up here, because historically a lot of young folks or people in general would move from here to seek, if they wanted to pursue music as
to Portland or Seattle or bigger markets, for sure.
Yeah, and my band was actually on a label out of Portland, and they were always like, "Come on, just move on over here." But we love living in Idaho, and really, sort of, as the internet was developing too, so it was, just seeing that there's you can work from here. Mm-hmm. If you can work from here for doing other things, why can't this also be a music scene? And one of the things I've always loved about the music scene here is it's not, as industry driven as like a Los Angeles or somewhere, and so you get a lot of like creative art coming out of it. And so,
the other thing I find here, and this might just be some of my story from playing in bands a long time ago and kind of knowing a lot of musicians, it's also very accessible here, right? So that's another great thing is a lot of the bands that I kind of follow that are here locally, mm-hmm. I can just go meet these people and like don't ever really feel like there's any kind of barriers there to knowing whoever you want to know.
Yeah.
So and remind me, at the last Treefort, how many bands did you guys have play over the course of 5 days?
Over 5 days. I think it was this, the last few years it's been right around like 440 bands.
So make sure 430 bands in 5 days. From my experience going to Treefort, it's impossible to see it all by design, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. But that's what's cool about it, is you really get this opportunity to kind of really explore for 5 days. Where are you out walking around downtown?
One of the things that just to that too, like the cross pollination that happens because of that. Like, mm-hmm. I love like a bluegrass fan might like step into like a metal show and that they never would have gone to otherwise and be like, oh, this is rad. They're shredders too, or vice versa. And that really opportunity for people to discover things they wouldn't have actively sought out on their own.
Well, and one of my favorite, I had a conversation with you over coffee probably about 3 or 4 years ago, as you and Drew were kind of actually advising us on running Startup Week. Mm-hmm. And you said something to me that's always resonated, which is that the thing that was the most successful about Treefort was that we made it a festival of discovery. Mm-hmm. And I was like, ding, mm-hmm. like, of course, right? The fact that's what experiential time out of your house is really for, is to be discovering new experiences, discovering new people, and discovering new ideas. So really love that about Treefort, and I love what you guys have built. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about how you got involved.
Yeah. So I got involved, kind of was saying, is like I was part of the independent like music scene around the country for basically like from 2007 until, we started the festival in 2011, so to about 2012. My wife and I, we were living on the road in a van, like literally like I think 250 days out of the year, we were just playing shows in all the states all around, and we were, it was very do-it-yourself booking.
Sure, yeah.
Our own tours, sleeping on a lot of floors and stuff. But through that, we played a lot of festivals, kind of like Treefort. There was one in Denver called the Underground Music Showcase. There was Music Fest Northwest in Portland. There was CMJ in New York City, which was based on college radio stuff, and some others. But also, we played South by Southwest in 2010 for the first time, and we were the only Idaho band there. And I remember just leaving that, being like, there's like just really wanting to take more Idaho acts there, just help, and because it was sort of a calling card of us for a long time as we were on the road. Everyone like, you're from Idaho, like what? I
There's musicians in Idaho.
yeah, exactly.
What?
I felt like we were more like geography teachers to folks than like about music, just explain to them where Idaho was and stuff. And so
It's neighbor of Iowa, right?
yeah, exactly. So it became like this passionate thing to like want to. So actually, in 2012, when the first Treefort happened, I actually helped with the first like Idaho showcase at South by Southwest that a year. And so kind of those forces kind of, being like sort of motivated to help showcase Idaho a little bit more. And so so that year we had Built Spill and Youth Lagoon had just like risen up, and Hill Folk Noir went with us, and LaFleur, Brett Netson played with his band, and my band Finn Riggins played that year. But simultaneously, I had met Lori and Drew, who were actively curious about opening a venue, but had no experience in the music scene. And so a few of us had been talking for a while about how like this sort of multi-venue festival could work really well in Boise and help highlight the scene that's here and help strengthen the venue ecosystem and stuff. So in the summer of 2011, after meeting them, sort of pitched this idea that like maybe we could try this here, especially because especially the year before that, like all this traffic leaving South by Southwest, there's very little places out west for them to play. And I'd helped set up some shows, and it was just like tons of bands wanting to play. So there was like a need to, it's sort of like
There's a void.
There was a void to fill out here. And
when you talk about startups or starting any kind of
Yes.
venture, is like really understanding where the gaps are in the market, because it makes your success trajectory like so much more likely when you're filling a very real and desirable need. And so
Totally.
for you guys recognizing that, so South by Southwest happens, and then about 2 weeks later, your guys' event happens, and there's all these bands that are trying to, pick up their
Yeah.
next shows and those tour dates. So
Well, and similarly from that void standpoint, it's like something that Treefort has really like been passionate about, and it's something that I had the experience to bring to the table is make it very like artist centric. So I'd been an artist at a lot of these festivals, and could really see the gaps in like what an artist would want from the experience. And some of those things are like artists, it's pretty well known that we've taken a different approach to like sponsorships and stuff, and like not having these big sponsors on the back of stages and stuff. That was something that, especially at South by Southwest, a lot of artists were getting really sick of. Like they didn't always want to be associated with all these other brands and stuff. And so,
well, South by Southwest will take it to extreme. They'll just have like a sponsor rep come out and like
Exactly.
intro the band.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
and
it's all for sale.
Yeah, and there's a line that's partially how sustainability is happening. So we're not like burn it all down type of perspective, but there was a lot about, and not only that, it was like, and it was also really passionate for us to like treat all artists the same, no matter what level, to a decent degree. So some of the voids we started filling as well were just like this really like artist-driven festival that that really reflected that community. Because another thing, and we do work with a lot of agents and book bigger bands, but especially in the region, we book a lot of like unrepresented bands. And, and really like give like the DIY scene a space here. And so,
I mean, you know the percentage better than I, but just from attending Treefort for multiple years, as far as I can guess, it's almost like 75, 80% of your bands represent that kind of underserved group of musicians, right?
And at the time, like to apply to a lot of festivals, like $30 just to apply to a festival. So we've always had our submissions free and stuff like. So just little things like that really helped us stand out amongst the festival scene at large in the nation too. And so, and then Boise being so walkable too, I think just blows it when people come. They're just a lot of these festivals, like half the venues are across a river or something, and you can't bounce around as naturally as you can in Boise. So there was a strong need for it, and I agree. That's also just regionally where we're located. Like there was a big gap here. There was no event kind of like that, like a larger festival and stuff. So it's one reason why I think it got legs pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it did. So talk to me kind of about like the attendance numbers the first year to the attendance numbers of like give us a perception of like growth.
Yeah. So I don't have those offhand, but I do know like the first year, I think in total, I think there was less than 1,000 tickets sold before it started, but throughout, I think there was about 2,000 attendees plus all these bands, so it kind of filled the spaces. But I think that first year there was only like 10 venues. So now, like during Treefort, like almost 9 years in, essentially, on peak night on Saturday night, there's almost 30 different stages active, and I think there's like 5,000 paid attendees, and usually between volunteers and bands, like another 5,000-ish per night. So it's not like a Coachella huge, but it definitely.
Well, it certainly adds
So-
up. I mean, over the course of the entire Treefort Festival, you guys have numbers that are. What's like the total number?
Yeah.
of attendance?
So what we've gotten is like from, there's a lot of different ways people can experience Treefort. So
It's hard to count,
It's
yeah.
hard to count, but the best way we have is like through like how many different unique visitors have been about 25,000.
Yeah.
So
Per
yeah.
year.
Per year over the 5 days, and
Yeah.
and about 30% of those come from out of state too. So we get a lot of travelers, and there's this type of festival, this sort of like discovery multi-venue festival. They're fans of that style of festival. That
Yeah.
We've had some travel from overseas, even as this being one of the premier festivals of that type out there. So
Well, I don't know if Eventbrite still has this feature in its back end, but one year Drew was nice enough to show me the like plot point map of where everyone had bought tickets for Treefort.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of tickets that were purchased from other places in the
Yeah.
world. I mean, Japan and Switzerland and
Yeah.
lots in Europe. And so,
Yeah.
it was very cool to see people literally coming from all over the world to Boise, Idaho to come experience 430 bands, right?
Yeah.
So, kind of pivoting this conversation a little bit, I think a lot of times, like we all grow up being asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And like weirdly enough, that's probably not the right question. The question probably is like, what problem do you want to solve when you grow up, right? And so, what advice do you have for someone who's really trying to like go through that cadence and understand like or figure out what problem they want to try and solve and how you would go about doing that? I mean, you just told us you went from being kind of a traveling artist to now running, the largest music festival in Idaho. And so, how did you make that transition? How did you find your purpose in that journey?
Well, I think one thing I would share is that sometimes it may take time. So for me, like I originally went to college as a chemical engineering major, and was in the engineering department at the University of Idaho for about a year and a half before I started taking some writing classes, and was had a growing fandom for music. And I just remember, actually, I'll share. There's this. I remember being in a chemical engineering lab with an older friend. I think he was 32 at the time, and
Old.
I know,
Oh my
right? Yeah,
gosh.
exactly. But I remember this moment really clearly, and because he was just like, he had just come back to school after following the Grateful Dead for a while, and I remember just it clicked in my head. I was like, whoa, so you can come back if things. I was like, cool. I'm gonna pivot and do what I really truly. I was good at math and science and stuff, so I just sort of like on this sort of not sure what I wanted to do path, like a lot of kids are at that age, just chasing like, well, I want a good job, so I guess I'll go in engineering. So at that moment in time, I switched. I started taking a bunch of music classes, and really started pursuing something that I was passionate about. So I started doing that, and then simultaneously, I joined the student sound company on. So I started learning how to do sound. I ended up learning how to book shows. I became part of the student activity. So I started chasing that passion in every sort of nook and cranny that I could find it. And at the time, didn't realize I was building a resume that would be really applicable down the road.
Down the road, yeah.
At the time, I was really frustrated there weren't more bands on campus that were cool, I guess. I was, and so started solving that problem. And then it was just really passionate about wanting to play in a band, and was really focused on that sort of narrow path of my own. But as I was navigating the sort of music community and music industry, I think there was a big, I just noticed a lot of gaps that I wasn't excited about. I didn't want to move to Los Angeles. I didn't want to buy cool clothes. There's a lot of things I didn't want to do with how that worked. I wanted to live in Idaho. So then it started becoming like, okay, how do I solve this puzzle? Not only for myself, but maybe for others.
Well, also for your community, right?
Yeah.
Well, and you kind of touched on something too. I think, all of us growing up, we heard the cliches of like, follow your passions, right? And now that I'm a little bit older, I think I realize what that actually means. Like, it's not telling you just to like, just run at something that like makes you happy or whatever. What it's really saying is that as long as you're moving like driving towards goals, working on something that you find enjoyable, down the road, like the culmination of all that adds up.
Yeah.
It's when you kind of just like throw your hands up in the air and get frustrated and stop and don't want to do anything that, those things don't come true, right? So like follow your passions is really more about just doing something as opposed to doing nothing, right?
Yeah, and just like sometimes it's solving small problems, and eventually that'll culminate maybe in solving a bigger problem. And yeah, I would agree. Just like that's kind of my experience has been just taking life as it sort of comes and taking opportunity, saying yes a lot. That's another thing I think is really important. It's like just saying yes a lot to opportunities that and just seeing where they develop, and so and just learning a lot. I would say like, and this is sometimes harder to do by design, but if there is like a bigger problem you want to solve, learn all facets of it. So for me, like one reason I think I've been, you know, good at my job with helping start Treefort is I've set up the sound systems. I know how those run. I've played on the stage. I've booked the tours. I've helped put on shows, and I kind of understand it from the ground up. And so it's a little easier for me to like, because I've swept the floors and I've cleaned the like bathrooms and stuff. And so I think a lot of people want to jump to leading
Something.
something instead of like.
They forget that taking out the trash is the most important job in the whole organization,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a real important piece too.
It's funny you say that because I had another interview with another founder over the course of Startup Week, and we were talking about his journey a little bit, and it reminded me a ton of what you just said. He wanted to start a company, and so the very first thing, it was a technology company, the very first thing he decided to do was learn how to code. Like, he had no experience doing that. He'd had a technical co-founder, and he decided, I need to know how to do the most important job that's going to exist in my company before I feel comfortable launching my company.
Yeah.
And to some extent, you just said the same thing.
Same thing.
Which
Totally.
is right. Get completely engrossed and involved in whatever it is you're trying to do. So that way, and I think there's a lot of value in that because the further your venture goes, the more you understand every single little in and out of what has to happen, and then you can understand what's underperforming or overperforming. So,
there's a lot that kind of reflects itself through a lot of different ways you look at it. But even just if I just stay in the music scene, I would tell the young bands too, is like go watch other bands. Don't get so caught up in just like what you're doing. Like learn the environment that you're trying to strive in. Really. Go watch other bands, study what they're doing, and learn what they're doing, and then apply that too. It's kind of similar, I guess. But.
Kind of in the same thread, and I like where we're going. Just like starting, getting going, finding your passions. Like, talk to me about the importance about having people around you. I'm a big believer in that. Nothing great is ever done in life when you do it by yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like having people around you to do it with you is a huge part of the value, both for you personally and then whatever the output is. So talk to me a little bit about how that process went for you, because you have several co-founders with Treefort, and you guys have been working on this for a long time. You all still like each other.
Yeah.
That's like
yes.
Bands have lasted way less than Treefort has. So.
Totally. Yeah, I'll get to that, but I'll also start, and that's kind of my philosophy around the music scene and building a music community too, is like, the bands I in a lot of cases that thrive at last too are not just the bands themselves, but like they support those around them. It's not just like pushing their own band. It's like, that's kind of the concept of a record label or anything like that, is you broaden the cause a little bit. I think with the diversity of people that helped start Treefort, I think, I was for the music mind, but if it was just a bunch of music minds together, we'd probably still be just throwing a show.
I bet you guys would make awesome music.
In the alley or something, and it's like, so I think there's such a, when building a team, and the Treefort team came together really organically, so, and I feel very grateful for that, but it is like, we all brought different skill sets, and we kind of let each other sort of find our niches, and we sort of fell into places, and I think, and also willing to help each other out and stuff. So, I mean, Treefort's success is definitely born on, and then that goes into these like broader layers of like the volunteer crew, and I think the way we've approached it has been very much like, cool, you want to help? Here's a shovel. Like, you decide where you want to dig, and so, and that just has born a lot of regenerative energy around how it's led. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
It does. I
Yeah.
mean, I think the point maybe that I was trying to drive
Yeah.
to a little bit is that, not to be too cliche and like quote a Steve Jobs quote. So I'm going to butcher it and say it wasn't Steve Jobs, but like, you know, having people around you who are comfortable, who you feel you can be vulnerable with, who understand what the goals are, who have their own unique skill sets differing than you, those are the kind of people that are perfect to surround yourself with, because when you guys do decide to do something, you're going to have enough of those skill sets around. I find that almost every venture I've ever done, whether it's volunteering, whether it's a business, like the very first people who come do it with me are my friends, right? And like, I think that is true over and over and over, and a lot of the people that I talk to, it certainly is true in Treefort's case, right? I mean, you guys knew each other, and those organic interactions that you're talking about, those are the ones that are the most lasting too. I mean, you already have a sense of built trust and all that great stuff. So, I mean, the takeaway there, I think, is I think we all at times feel like, we want to be the person who like leads the thing, who has the great idea, but nothing in life comes about because of just one individual, right? It's always a team.
Well, yeah, and especially, and part of that, if you are in a role of leadership with it, is allowing space for other people's ideas to build off of your own, and that gives them a seat at the table. It gives them buy-in, even if it's in just a band, like let the drummer come up with some ideas every once in a while, It's like
Every drummer is sitting here like, yes, right? Maybe the bassist too, right? He's the other.
So I
Poor
don't know.
bassist.
Because it becomes, bigger than what you could create by yourself. Like, that's the spirit of collaboration. That's why collaboration is a dynamic experience, and so.
Well, and kind of the third layer to that, that I think Treefort has such a unique experience is you touched on it with the volunteers, you touched on it with the team a little bit, but I've always felt, as both an attendee of Treefort, a sponsor of Treefort, that like I've always thought that me as a community member is also invited to come do it with you.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe we can close out kind of talking about the importance of like inviting your community to come be of service and to come participate, because that's always been the most rewarding part.
Yeah, yeah. I think that some of the strength of Treefort has been a relatively small core leadership team that just has helped create the environment for those things to happen. Because of the flip side, if everyone's at the table, nothing gets done. But then leaving, so we've sort of looked at that team as creating the environment, and then inviting a lot of other people in, and that's how all these forts have gotten started. People from the community coming in and finding their own piece with it, and I think, and it's granted, Treefort's a particular event, a particular business that this very inviting approach works, and not everything's going to work quite like that, but that has been our strength, is once again like sort of decentralizing a lot of the experience, and like crowdsourcing it, kind of, I guess, is one way to look at it. But
well, it's also an interesting way to get feedback to better yourself too. I mean, we teach a lot of founders this concept of getting user feedback, and in some regards, there's no better way to do that than just to incorporate it in the planning of, in this case, an event. Right? You're going to solve so many things ahead of the curve, because it's your actual consumers of your thing who are coming up with the solutions, right? And I love thinking about problems to solve in those terms, right? I think it's very...
and so within Treefort too, kind of parallel to all this, is like, we don't sit as a leadership team and decide, let's start a yoga wing of this. Like, the yoga community came to us and like, hey, you guys should start a yoga, and it's like, great, can you help us do it in a genuine reflection of what your community would want? And so that, once again, is like letting them identify the problem and helping solve it.
Well, and when I was talking earlier, I think I was really reacting to the conversations I've had for years about Hackfort with you guys, right? Like, we've had long conversations about Hackfort and how to keep that event, moving forward and going better. And so, no, that's something that's very exciting. And again, incorporating that into what you're doing, I think, is such an important step. And so with that, I mean, I appreciate again that you came down and talked with us. This was a really exciting conversation. kind of the takeaways that I take from this is I think we talked about, following your passions, very important, building a trustworthy team around you, and then inviting others to come take leadership roles with you. I can't think of better advice to have in 25 minutes here. So
Thanks for
thank
having
you
me.
so much,
Yeah,
Eric.
yeah.